Welcome to the Innovation of Work podcast. I could not be more excited about our guest today, Jeff DeGraff. He is, I think, probably the perfect guest for this podcast. Just a brief summary about Jeff, and then we'll get into a really great discussion. He's both an advisor to Fortune 500 companies. He's a professor at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. He's advised many companies over the years, and he's also an author. And also, he is dubbed the Dean of Innovation, which I can't wait to talk about a little bit more. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me on, Robin.
Well, let's jump right in. I really want to get into kind of your origin story. You've been working on creativity and innovation for many, many years. Looks like way back into college is really when you got into it. Could you talk a little bit about how you got into this field, and maybe more importantly, how did you get dubbed the Dean of Innovation?
Well, the origin story is almost unbelievable. I was a terrible high school student. I got to college as an athlete, and I stayed in college as a teamster. I'm from a blue collar neighborhood.
Yeah.
And through just a whole series of stuff, I went through college very quickly. All the way through my PhD, because I couldn't think the way most people do. I'm sure I'm ADD and I'm dyslexic and all the things. So you have to figure out your own way of doing things. And I'm kind of a builder person. So I understand things by building them. Mm-hmm. So when I was 25, I came to Ann Arbor to work in the medical school as a professor, as a very young professor. And I had all these awards, and I got here and I said, I don't really like this very much. And so I met a guy in a hippie bar who worked for a guy who had a $20 million pizza company. And 5 years and billions of dollars later, I sold Domino's Pizza to Bain Capital and Mitt Romney. So I learned about business by building one.
That's
People stopped talking to me because I have my PhD's in the technology area.
Right.
And then Bob Quinn came to see me and he said, they'd written a long story. They'd been a study on all the stuff I built at Domino's. And that's where I got the name, the Dean of Innovation, because my job at Domino's was doing everything that the boss wanted me to do. So remember, he went from 20 million to a billionaire. So we bought the Detroit Tigers. So we had to build a television network. And he wanted to cover the Pope. So we had to build a mobile satellite network. And he wanted to have, this is going back, your listeners will think this is bizarre. He wanted to have people be able to talk to each other on PCs directly. So
I remember.
I was an advisor to Steve Jobs and what was called AIS, Applied Integrated Systems, before there's an internet. And you know that becomes AppleNet becomes Connect, which when he comes back becomes iTunes. So I just by dumb luck worked for this really interesting guy who sent me into all these things. So when I got to Michigan, they said, you want to teach MBAs? And I said, no, they're dull, drab, and awful. You can hear them think. You know, these were the guys, we stole their lunch money, you know, at PepsiCo and stuff. And he said, that's why we need you here. And that was 31 years ago.
That's amazing.
So I built these innovation labs. I've had a lot of, it's just dumb luck. Larry Page was a student and, you know, founder of Google. So you get lucky, you know, you got to be mindful. And, so I'm a good example of, you know, it's never too late. You know, you really can turn it around. You know, your mom and dad might tell you that. Well, it turned out okay for me. And I cannot emphasize enough how lucky I was to find great mentors.
Yeah.
To just be in the right place at the right time. And, you know, it took a little work too.
That's amazing. And, you know, I would say perhaps it dates us a little bit, both a little bit, but I remember all of that and then some about, you know, trying to get computers to talk together and pre-internet, fun times. It's amazing to see what's kind of happened with innovation over the years, especially on the tech space. Curious though, what keeps you motivated and passionate about innovation? I've heard you speak before, and we'll talk about your new book here in a few, but what really drives you to stay you know, passionate for this area?
Well, everybody has a mission. And my mission is the democratization of innovation. And I'm very American this way.
Yeah.
I feel very concerned that America will lose its way if we don't have a sense of destiny. I think it's part of the culture I grew up in, the country I grew up in. And so the books on creativity are, they're either very new agey, which is fine. And I like them. I don't have but they're not they're not very, they're inspirational. They're not very technical. And then a lot of them are kind of very businessy and about how to make $1 zillion.
Yeah.
And, I've done okay in life, but I don't think that's not who I want to talk to. So what I did was, because I'm the last student of the person who really created this field, Rudolf Farnheim. If your listeners don't know anything about the history of the field of creativity, it started at the University of Berlin in 1900 by a guy named Max Wertheimer. He has two famous students, Kurt Lewin, who creates organizational psychology, and Rudolf Farnheim, who creates what we would now call design thinking or creativity studies.
Yeah.
And I'm the end of the line. So I buy his house when he has a stroke, et cetera. So what I did, since I'm early in the field, there's a person in front of me at Stanford named Mike Ray. He was in front of me. But there was nobody in this field. This was like crazy stuff when I started.
Sure.
So I took a lot of the research, the stuff that still on all these journals, right?
Yeah.
Grants and all that stuff that professors do. And I made it simple. I made it pithy, something that where in the neighborhood I'm from would understand. And then I took the 6 skills, because I've been in over half the Fortune 500 now at the senior level. The 6 skills that I think everybody at least should have half of them to succeed at a business. And I simplified them and said, I like these. So some you will have seen, a lot of them you will not have seen. But the reason for doing this, Robin, was to say minimally, if you can think like this and you can master a few of these skills, you can make this work for you.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that Fortune 500 experience. You have worked with the who's who, General Electric, Coca-Cola, so on and so forth. Could you talk a little bit about maybe 1 or 2 of those transformational moments that really stand out for you? And what were the keys to those innovations that really drove the change?
Yeah, let me, right off the bat, one comes to mind. There's a venerable English news organization called Reuters.
Yep.
And if you've been in downtown, I've been in Times Square, you see the Reuters building. I was part of that whole thing too. But Reuters was on the verge of bankruptcy. Reuters had always been very, very English. They'd always done things in a very specific way. And I got called in by the chairman of the board, a wonderful man named Sir Christopher Hawke. I love this guy. And he said, they brought me in. We need to change this. What are we going to do?
Right.
And so I said, you've got a legal counsel who's running your area in Brazil named Tom Glosser. I think you ought to be named the next CEO. And stunningly, he was. So so now I'm flying to London, like weekly kind of thing.
Right.
And I have a lot of these experiences in my career. And so we finally say we've got to have a galvanizing moment. So we bring everybody from Reuters to their annual conference. Not everybody, but the leaders and the best and the brightest.
Yeah, sure.
And we create an extremely intense, disruptive jumpstart in an old truck warehouse, what's called a lorry warehouse, just outside of Notting Hill on Portobello Road. So we have these romantic notions, but actually kind of the old flea shop part of London.
Right.
And we brought everybody together and we said, we're going to completely remake this company from top to bottom. That means we're going to sell things. We're going to lay people off. We're going to hire people. This is going to be rough.
Yeah.
And in a 2-day period of time, we developed a strategy which had a lot of people buying in. A lot of people had planned to leave the company, kind of bought in. So remember, Reuters is a news organization at the time. And, this is when Bloomberg's trying to get a foothold and stuff. And how do we recreate this organization to be tech company, to be a fountain for those companies? And it was stunning because basically the company was trading at something like $1.50 a share.
Right.
And most people, and that happens, the best people jump ship. They bought, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think it was something like $70 million worth of shares on the spot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, insane amount. And what happened was it took about 2 years to turn it, but something that never happens. Thomson got involved, the Canadian information company, And instead of Thomson overtaking Reuters, Thomson made the CEO of Reuters the CEO of Thomson Reuters,
Yeah.
right? Because they could see that we saw the future of what was going to happen here. So those are the kind of things where normally, Robin, the old assimilates the new.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
in these situations of real innovation, punctuated equilibrium, the new assimilates the old. And boy, we're seeing that now with COVID, aren't we?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Think about how our government in particular and our higher ed institutions, mea culpa,
Yep.
have failed tragically on any, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, any objective measurement. We're comparable to India, Mexico, and Brazil, which is not, we're the United States.
Right.
But while that's going on, when this event has thrown our hierarchies, I want people to understand what's emerging. So all of a sudden, Harvard has all these startups and Moderna and, and Michigan and Pfizer and, some VCs and 20 startups and FinTech and, Stanford deals with Imperial and they've got a synthetic RNA and they're dealing with, J&J and, Oxford and AstraZeneca. All of a sudden, we have 116 creativity clusters emerging organically.
Yeah.
Now we're down to 6. And it's a foot race. Now it's real competition. This is very American. You see my blood's getting up here. Like, now we're going to see who's, who can best who here.
Yeah.
But the thing of it is, drug discovery on a new vaccine, a radical vaccine, should take 8.5 years.
Yeah.
It's going to go, I think it's about around mid-September, or not September, I think around mid-January, we're going to have something. And around the end of the summer, we'll be, I think the CDC's right. End of the summer, we'll be kind of on board. But drug discovery is now taking about 20% of the time as it used to take.
Yeah.
And the FDA will never put this genie back in the bottle. Ever.
You can't.
Ever.
Shouldn't,
and
right?
Are we ever going to get our prices again now that we're on Zoom all the time? So the notion is what I want people to hear on your podcast.
Yeah.
This is one of the few moments in our history that the new will assimilate the old. It's an innovation moment.
It has to happen too. It's there's forcing functions that are outside of our control that are causing this to happen.
It turns out that necessity is indeed the mother of invention.
Absolutely.
Right, we have that old saw. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about a new book that you have just released, The Creative Mindset. First of all, congratulations. You have multiple books that you published. What was the spark to write this book? And I guess who needs this book, and how might those concepts in the book really help people to keep innovating?
Yeah, I wrote this book for everybody. I didn't want to write this book for, I've written a lot of books for business leaders and, there's a lot of books out there. My big thing was, what about the person who's trying to, just make their life better and new? What about the person who's got a side hustle? The person who's got a great recipe, she wants to see it in some restaurants in her town. What about the person who's trying to do something with their church group, trying to get their kid into a decent university? I call this creativizing, taking the ordinary and trying to make it extraordinary. And it's really my homage. My mother and father are amazing people. I think half of life is just being born to the right people. You know what I mean? Just people who get it. And we should be grateful and take care of them, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I grew up in a HUD house. And my mother and father could take a dime and just turn it into, we'd go to the Upper Peninsula, a clutch would burn out, and then it became a game about how to trade services and, and how to get home. And the next thing you know, you're at home. And everybody, this was my parents. So this is me trying to reignite the democratization of innovation. This is me trying to say, you didn't have to go to a good university. You didn't have to be born to the right parents. Yeah. You can make something happen. But in order to do this, you have to do two things. One, you have to have a mindset for it.
Yeah.
And that's important because, like my mother and father, you have to be able to see opportunity where no one else sees it. And then the second thing is you have to master at least a few skills, which incidentally, the neural net of your mind has bequeathed to you almost all these skills. You have to become mindful, though, of using them. So mindset and just a few skills. And if you can do that, you know, I'm not saying I'm not a your dreams come true guy, but I'm a you're moving forward guy.
Gotcha.
You're going to get some momentum person.
Yeah, and looking at the book and reading a good portion of it, I mean, this is a workbook. This isn't just a casually read. I mean, you can glean a lot from it, but this is really an opportunity to learn how to apply the concepts that you've outlined. What could you share a couple of tidbits on, tips for how do you really get that creative mindset? Given the fact that we've got it all, how do we find it and use it?
Yeah. I want to add to this though, before we start.
Sure.
There is a whole, if you go to my webpage, jeffdegraff.com, and you go to resources, there are worksheets for the book. There
Great.
are 15 videos that show you how to do every step. There are slides for everything. So I've really pushed everything into the digital domain that I could, and saying, you don't have to spend another nickel. If you buy the book, everything you need to do this with your church or your school during COVID, it's there. And I'm really, really big on teachers giving them something here. So I
Yeah,
see the state of Maryland's adopted some of this. So I
that's
think we'll see
awesome.
this. So creative mindset.
Yeah.
Your brain naturally, the neural nets basically make connections in very complicated ways. And creativity is just allowing your brain to do that. But in order for you to be creative, you have to do a couple things. You have to break your dominant logic or habit-bound thinking. You have to become aware of your thinking. So let me give you a start.
Okay.
When are you creative? Robin, are you a morning creative person, an afternoon creative person, or an evening creative person? When are you most creative?
Oh, definitely evening.
Okay, see, I'm married to an evening person. I'm an early morning person.
Yeah.
I'm a 5 a.m., right? I drive her crazy, roll out, go downstairs, work on stuff. Are
Okay.
you creative when it's quiet or when there's music on or people talking?
I both actually, but I really prefer music.
Okay, good. Are you creative when you're relaxing, like meditating or before you go to sleep? Or are you creative when you're working out or stimulated?
Uh, Both. Probably more when I go to sleep. I can't quite turn it off.
Okay, so here's the first thing. It's not creativity on demand. It's creativity when creativity demands it.
Yeah.
When are you creative? So I want to tell you what a hypocrite I am. A terrible
Okay.
hypocrite. I write a lot of books. I'm a 2 million mile guy on Delta alone, right?
Oh my
Delta
goodness.
Airlines. So I always say and I write a lot. I write hundreds of articles and all that stuff. So I say, I'm always going to write on the airplane. Whenever I get in the airplane, I can never write. But
Yeah.
I always plan on writing on the airplane. What I do instead is I try for about half an hour, and I do this all the time. It's like a ritual on how ridiculous I am. And then what'll happen is I'll go to sleep.
Yeah.
So I get to sleep, and then when I go to the hotel the next morning, I'll get up at 5 before I work, and I'll write. So I can write in hotels when it's quiet in the morning, but I can't write on airplanes. So if I were smarter, I'd say, you can't write on airplanes, Jeff. Stop trying to write on airplanes.
Right, right.
But that's what we all do. We
Yeah.
say, oh, I'm going to be open from 2 to 3. I'm going to write the paper from 2 to 3. Are you creative from 2 to 3? No, don't write the paper from 2 to 3.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah.
Other obvious things. I believe the sign of an elegant mind is to look for disconfirming feedback. Look for people who don't agree with you,
Yeah.
who are smart. They're not here to argue with you because innovation is the result of the creative power of constructive conflict. So
Right.
I'm a believer that we're creative in an ecosystem with other people,
Right.
right? Lennon and McCartney, Charlie Munger
Oh,
and
yeah.
Warren Buffett, you're often going to see opposites. And so one, number two, surround yourself with people who aren't like you, who have
Yeah.
different super skills. 3, the other thing that I think is a sign of an elegant mind is look for incongruities.
Mm-hmm.
I spend a lot of time, and a lot of my biggest breakthroughs that people have talked about have come from, I just look at things and I ask myself, does this go with this? Is this where I'm likely to find this?
Right.
So let me give you an example. I had a GSA, really bright young woman. She comes in and she's studying in a scientific discipline, and she's very, very bright. She went to Smith College. She's a very bright person.
Right.
And I'm watching how she talks and interacts and the things she does. And one day I said to her, you just don't look like the ordinary kind of person who's in this field. And I said, I'm usually a pretty good judge of this. I'm seeing these things that you do,
Right.
but that doesn't seem to fit. She got all flush.
Uh-oh.
She's got a little emotional, and she said, well, something you don't know is when I was a undergraduate, I was admitted to the Juilliard School. And
Oh,
she's from Asia. My parents didn't want me to be a performer. And I said, okay. So now the issue is, okay, I see who you are. I'm not judging, and I'm not trying to
right.
violate anyone's space. I see who you are. Now, how do we take who you really are and help you get where you need to go, where you want to go? Is this
Gotcha.
making sense? So your look for that doesn't seem to go with that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's it's a long story. I won't bore you with it, but I was doing a project at before the last election with the CIA, and I had some observations about what I thought was going to happen in a number of different areas. And they called me back and said, how did you know this? And I said, I didn't. What I saw were incongruities.
Right.
And then you start thinking for yourself for a moment, if this
Right.
makes sense to you. So that's
Yeah.
a creative mindset. Can you get everybody out of your head? Can you hear yourself think?
Right.
What do you think?
Right.
Which is scary, and
Sometimes, yes.
yeah, well, for me, a lot of times I'm thinking, wow, I hope that's not true. But and then you can get your bearing. So those are just three
Gotcha.
examples off the top of my head about the creative mindset, what you have to do, but just being aware.
Love that. I love that. I think too. Yeah, I am totally with you. It is hard not to fight what you think you should be doing. Your example of trying to write on the plane. I try to write or read on the plane, and I can't do that either. But just kind of accepting the way you are and the way you work. That's a wonderful tip. I that
And
really
and
hits home with me personally.
your gift and your limits. The other part,
Yes.
people love to talk about their gifts. What about your limits?
Yeah.
So you have to bring people around you who are good at things you're not good at.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, and that kind of ties to what we try to do in business where, it makes total sense to build diverse teams who are complementary and who bring different perspectives. Um, Kind of on that note, how do you apply kind of that creative mindset and kind of those tips that you gave when you're dealing with a larger team who isn't necessarily creative at 2 p.m. when you're having that brainstorming meeting? How do you kind of foster creativity in that scenario? What are some tips?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I'm a big believer in divide and conquer. I don't think large group. Yeah, this is like McChrystal books. His book about a team of teams.
Right,
That's
right.
the way I've run everything. I just think once you get to a certain size, you're no longer working in sync with each other.
Yeah.
So try to divide tasks and challenges into smaller pieces. The other thing is, in previous books, some of your listeners will know I'm one of the authors. Well, I'm the author of the Innovation Code and the Innovation Genome, but it's
Right.
based on the Competing Values Framework. Quinn and Cameron, who brought me to Michigan, they're my mentors.
Yeah.
So I'm trying very much to make sure that in smaller teams, I create constructive conflict by making sure that I've got a balance of perspectives, which doesn't mean the same number, because some people are more demonstrative or stronger than other people, or maybe
Right.
but I try and make sure that we can think around the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The other two things that I try and do is I'm a big believer in see one, do one, teach one.
Okay.
So do two. See one, do one, teach one. So the notion is when I've got a team, you want to try and model the behavior that you're trying to enlist.
Right.
I call them the 4 F's.
Okay.
What we know of the research. One, fluency. Whoever said one idea is better than 100 bad ideas probably never invented anything. 100 bad ideas way better than one good one. And so
Absolutely.
you have to show them you have some bad ideas, and
Yeah.
off that will come good ones. Two, the whole idea of flexibility. That you took something from one area and you applied it to another. Steve Jobs' famous Stanford speech. I mean, so much of my career has been that. I'm like, how'd you think of that? Well, I saw it a couple weeks ago over here, and it
Yeah.
kind of worked for them. So, bring your poetry and and whatever you're watching on TV and the thing you're doing in the garage or the kitchen to work.
Right.
The
Right.
next is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
This is an old professor's trick, but it's a great one, and that is if somebody has a stupid idea, just say that's a great idea. You should try it, because
Okay.
what they'll figure out in the first chapter is it's not working.
Yeah.
And people will make adjustments. But if you say, we can't do that, or that's a bad idea, you're going to derail the whole thing.
Sure,
And
you just shut
remember,
it down.
all learning, Robin, is developmental. If you don't believe that, take out a piece of paper and draw a picture of your dog. And
Yeah.
everyone can tell you at what age you stopped learning to draw. Play an instrument, speak a foreign language. It doesn't matter whether you're 8 or 80, you're going through the failure cycle. That's how
Yeah.
we learn. All
Yeah.
learning is developmental.
No,
And
I love it.
finally, flow.
Okay.
Know when you're creative, who you're creative with. And remember, you don't get a lot of flow states. We're creative. It depends on whose research you're reading, 2 to 3 times a day. When it rains, are you prepared, for when it rains? I carry with me I'm an old guy, a little pocket thing, it's happening. It's happening. You
Right.
kind of rush around, quiet, I'm not talking to you, it's happening, and that sort of holds you over. So just those 4 things, I think right off the bat, really help you with a group and a group that gets stuck. And just remember also, I'm rambling on, which
No,
is
you're awesome. This is great.
So just remember, in this age of Zoom, nobody can keep this kind of focus and concentration for 3 hours.
Oh, absolutely not.
30 minutes on, 20 minutes off, something like that. That's what I try and do.
Yeah. Yeah. One follow-up to that. That was fantastic, by the way. When you think about how to spot innovation, you have a bit in the book about that. How do you spot that innovation, innovative opportunities? And then maybe the follow-up would be, I'm CEO of a startup, and this is what we do. We innovate every day.
Yeah.
And are continuing to look for those opportunities. What are some thoughts that you have around how do you spot those opportunities? How do you be open to that?
I want to tell you about a conversation I had last week with a senior person at one of our military services.
Yeah.
And they said, I do a lot of work with the military. They said, I've got this idea about how we're going to stop this thing from happening. I can't get into the details of this, but
Sure.
I said, well, let me hear what it is. And they went into this whole thing, and I said, it's a great idea, but it's an idea I could have thought of driving in this morning, and I guarantee your enemy has already thought of it.
Yeah.
I said,
Okay.
What happens after that? And there's this long pause. And I said, okay, let's do it another way. I'm going to destroy your idea. That's what I'm going to try and do.
Okay.
And what you're going to do is try and defend it. And you don't be defensive. And I'm going to destroy it. It took me about 2 minutes to completely destroy his idea.
Right. Right.
And I said, now you're going to rebuild the idea, right? I call it deconstruct to reconstruct. You're going to rebuild the idea. So to me, I'm very big on a couple of things. I'm very big, whenever you have a great idea, to ask yourself, what's the opposite of that idea, or how to ruin the idea?
Okay.
That's my
Really
first thing.
challenge yourself.
Second thing, I'm a technologist by trade, and I'm so not enamored with technology. I'm so not enamored. When somebody says, oh, I've got a technology that will do these 3 things, I'm like, so what? Tell me, because everybody has toys. Everybody's developing the next toy. Tell me how, let me put it another way, Robin. Whenever somebody tells about their innovation, I always ask them this question: whose problem does that solve?
Right.
And if you can't articulate to your mom and dad whose problem it solves, right? And then the issue is, if it's obvious whose problem it solves, there's 10,000 other people doing it.
Yeah.
What happens after that? What's the special sauce? And if it's 87 things, it's 86 too many.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that it does that no one else can do that you need? I'll give you a great example. There are literally hundreds of COVID tests out right now. What's the one thing that we don't have? We don't have one that can spontaneously tell you if you've got it or not. That's the one thing. Nothing else counts. So somebody says, mine's 97% accurate, there's 93. How many days does it take? Oh, mine takes 8 hours. I'm like, useless. That's the one thing. What's the one thing? So rather than trying to make it 97% effective, make it 89% effective, and you spontaneously know, because you can always give another test, and in the 89%, you're going to figure that out one way or the other. That's a protocol. So these are really great things that I think entrepreneurs get wrong. And the other thing that entrepreneurs, I think, get wrong all the time is design thinking. God bless design thinking. It's for a reason.
Sure.
But just because you design it doesn't mean you're right. Here's what I always tell people. Making, inventing something's hard.
Yeah.
Selling it's harder.
Yeah.
And moving the soft tissue of any large customer to actually adopt it is the hardest.
Sure.
So the notion is, you've got something interesting. Now see if you can manufacture, this is going to be the issue in January. Yeah, you got a vaccine.
Right.
Now I have to make 7 billion, actually, because we're going to have 2 shots, 14 billion doses of it.
And get it to people.
And yes, I'm just going to say, and deliver it, and then make sure that people are really being cured.
Absolutely.
This is the reality of what we're talking about. So yes, design thinking necessary, but not sufficient, entrepreneurs.
Right. Okay. All right. That's amazing. I've got 2 more things for you before we wrap. Our whole team, everything that we do is about digital transformation. And, paper was invented, back in the 8th century. And there's so much wonderful technology. Steve Jobs was instrumental in that. Before Steve, IBM, it goes way back. We've had wonderful advances that really help things like get a COVID vaccine or help you be more productive. And for what we do, we help keep workers safe.
Yep.
Question to you is, what would you tell leaders in companies where, kind of for that frontline worker or just for workers in general, they're still using paper forms and processes that maybe aren't effective and you can't get data out of it and you can't really innovate? What would you tell them about innovation?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. Right off the bat, I'd say, number one, when you get into the digital domain, you're dealing with 2 different generations. So I tell my children when they use technology, I helped invent that. And they go, yeah, but you don't use it. I'm like, yes, I'm a digital immigrant, right? So the people who are making important decisions, I hate to say this, I'm a boomer. We have all the money. We're rich. Our poor millennial children are poor. It's been terrible. But they are the digital generation that you're not having a problem with.
Yeah.
Because they know because being digital has a positive effect for them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My generation has anxiety that you'll lose something or we'll lose track of it, or is this secure? So
all the risk.
That's not a technological thing. That's an emotive thing. Remember, people make decisions not based on logic. They make emotional decisions.
Sure.
The number one reason people buy a car is the color it comes in, right? The second thing I would say is don't waste this crisis, because this is digital's chance to showcase what it can do, because now it has a real reason it has a real value proposition.
Absolutely.
Or you had to sell it. Now people are experiencing it. So I'm using this so I don't get disease. I'm using this because I can't go to the bookstore. I'm using this because I don't want to look in the mail that, that post person looks a little iffy. Right. So that would be the second thing. And then the final thing, which I think is important. I want to tell you a story, if I can do this quickly.
Yeah.
So when I was a young man, I worked on something called Project Zeno, and I worked on it with Steve Jobs. And it was to try and create literacy in the Los Angeles School District. Okay. And we did it by developing these, remember the old big CDs?
Oh, yeah.
The huge ones, the disc, the laser disc?
Yep.
We're teaching people how to drive a truck. So getting a Class S truck driver, we were going to teach people how to be literate, because Hudson Institute said that something like 1/3 of all graduates in the Los Angeles School District were functionally illiterate. So it's like giving people laptops and iPads today.
Right.
So we gave them this, and we said they're going to learn to read by learning to be a truck driver. And it turned out we didn't make any difference at all. Oh. And then in 1990, I got a call from the editor of Life magazine, and something really weird happened. She said, I want to talk to you about innovation. So I felt really good, Robin.
Yeah.
I'm a new professor. She said, I want to talk about your great uncle, Robert Fair DeGraff. Now, my father and his father didn't get along. I didn't know anything about my father's family. Nothing. It was a big blank. It's like, turns out my great uncle was the man who invented paperback books. He created this company called Pocket.
Oh, wow.
Right? Which we now know as Penguin, right?
That's awesome.
Well, when I read his biography, he created it because he thought if people could buy a book for a quarter in the train station, they'd become literate. Now, here's the moral I'm trying to give you and all your colleagues. And I made the same mistake he made of saying a better technology is going to get somebody what they need.
Right.
But that wasn't the problem. You've misidentified the problem.
Right.
The problem for the person in Los Angeles was even if they passed and learned to read, they weren't going to get a truck driving job. There were no truck driving jobs. The problem of the person in the train station was they were a day laborer. Reading wasn't going to help them do anything.
Right.
So I need the people who work for you to be the day laborer, the person in the school district. I need them to think deeply about what the problem really is.
Right.
And that's what digital is going to solve. So stop talking about the digital part and start talking about what the more endemic issue is as to why they're not adopting this.
No, that's outstanding. Yeah, I violently agree with that. That's wonderful guidance. All right, last question. So I am sure you must have a vision or a wish list of what kind of innovation you would like to see happen in your lifetime, aside from a COVID vaccine that truly works and gets distributed. What would you love to see?
I'd love to see a social form of innovation.
Okay.
And I'd like to see two things happen. I think we went to the moon, we licked the commies, and we built the net. That's my generation.
Yeah.
We ruined the environment, and we've created enormous social inequities. I'd like to see the democratization of innovation. I'd like to see it become compulsory, that we create, daycare opportunities for people to go and work in a lab somewhere, places where the academy, industry, and the military meet together, places where there's a limited amount of seed funding for young people who are trying to get a start in this thing. I'd like us to, it's my version of plant 10,000 trees.
Yeah.
I'd like us to plant 10,000 trees. And then the two space launches for these young people. One, let's shrink the gap. There shouldn't be, if in America, nobody should be hungry or, on the outside. It's America. We should not have that happen. And then two, fix the environment. And it's not, stop living in small houses unless you want to. Let's work on cars that and incidentally, this is entirely possible today. They get 300 miles to the gallon. And let's work on alternative ways and let's fix the planet so that our children get what they need and our grandchildren get what they need. Let's get back to what I think America is all about, in my opinion, which is let's make this better and new, and let's have a sense of destiny and ownership that it's our responsibility to do it.
Oh, that's great. And I think it all comes back to being creative and being open to those ideas so those things can flow and happen. So everyone needs to go buy your book.
And go to the website to get all the free tools. Make sure you get the free tools because that will help you do what you want to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks so much for your time today. Sincerely appreciate it. Fantastic conversation. I'm sure you and I could talk all day.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks for having me on.